Madagascar is on high alert. This says tropical storm Dumako is set to make land on the Indian Ocean island, which is still reeling from the effects of Cyclone Batsirai and tropical storm Anna. There have been warnings about the possibility of more cyclones for the Southern African and Madagascar area. For more on this, I'm joined now by Program Manager at Climate Justice and Social Ecological Transformation, Dr. Roland Ngam. Dr. Roland, good evening, and thank you very much for your time and joining us tonight here on In Focus. First and foremost, why Anna? Why Batsirai? Why these names? How do they come about?
Okay, thank you very much for having me. So there is an association of Southwest Indian Ocean nations, and they come together every 3 years and they give names. And these names really will follow an order of all cyclones that really have wind speeds of more than 37 miles. And so really we are following that order. We've gone from Anna to Batsirai to Cliff and now to Dumako that everyone is watching at the moment.
How are tropical systems formed, and is there something that is particularly happening in the southern parts of the continent that are causing the frequency of these systems?
Yes, so in a very short space of time, we've gone from Kenneth to Idai to Anna and now to Batsirai, and people are wondering why do we have so many destructive storms in such a short space of time? There is a very simple answer for this. It is the ocean warming that is happening very rapidly. We have emitted a lot of greenhouse gases that are now trapped in the atmosphere. And you will know that it is the oceans that store a majority of the CO2 that we emit, oceans and forests. And so if oceans are heating very rapidly, and the ocean floor is really very warm, it tends to cause those cyclone storms, and we are seeing the results of that.
World's biggest firms, who are the biggest polluter in a sense, who are failing to meet their net zero claims, are they to blame here? What is research suggesting? And are they taking seriously this effect or the impact of climate change?
I don't think that they are taking the impact seriously. Coal, for example, is the biggest contributor of greenhouse gases, and coal's contribution to global electricity production this year is going to increase from 38 to about 40%. We also have hyper-consumerism, which is a major problem. Countries have been urged to reduce consumption and reduce fossils. But from South Africa, which is about 45% contributor on the African continent, all the way to China, and so on, very few people seem to be listening. And there is also something that is at play at the moment, the energy crisis that is happening in Europe and also in Asia, India, China, and so on, is causing more countries to continue their dependence on fossils. Fortunately, South Africa is trying to lead the way on the African continent. They have $131 billion that was promised at COP26. They have made the promises to start the just transition process in Komati, and we hope that this is really going to accelerate.
Now, we're looking at those numbers. I mean, Cyclone Batsirai, death toll now sitting at about 120. We've got about 124,000 people who've been left destitute with homes damaged and destroyed, and 30,000 more displaced and camping in a number of sites. What would the impact of Dumako be in an already devastated situation?
Already, you're very right to mention those numbers. We had the first cyclone Anna, which killed about 70 people. Now Batsirai, which has already claimed about 126 lives slightly higher, and we have about 50,000 people displaced. This is really adding to about 1.6 million people who were pushed into acute vulnerability due to drought in southern Madagascar. So it is really a climate hit sub-region that we are talking about. In a very short space of time, over $1 billion worth of damage, about 15 billion rands worth of damage, and we're really bracing ourselves. These are really the impacts of climate change on people's lives. It is already real, and we shouldn't drag our feet anymore. We need to start putting in adaptation and mitigation measures.
If research, if activism like yourselves is not changing the minds of big business, big firms, what else is needed in this dimension of climate justice to get the message through?
I think that business is coming on board. Unfortunately, political and some business has been dragging its feet. But if you look at some of the major damage that we have had over the last couple of years, just to mention the floods that happened in Europe last year caused over $60 billion worth of damage. Batsirai and Anna have already caused about $1 billion worth of damage. And I think that people are beginning to sit up, not necessarily for the fact that we need to cap warming below 1.5 degrees, but really because it is beginning to hit us in the pockets. And insurance companies are already refusing to insure certain areas of our communities. And I believe that it is things like that, it is shifts like that that are really going to force people to start doing the right thing.
So what would be shaping our climate action going forward? I mean, do we need more legal instruments? Do we need, I mean, some have taken this issue of climate change and made it a political football, so it's a political issue for them. And of course, you are raising even broader issues around the ethical nature of poorer countries who are not really involved in these massive emissions being hit the hardest.
Yes, so you're very right to mention the legal aspect. The South African Constitution, for example, enshrines the right to a healthy environment. And also, President Cyril Ramaphosa has named the climate change, the Climate Commission at the presidency, which has really taken the just transition question seriously. The tug of war with Minister Mantashe obviously she mirrors the tug of war between the fossil industry and the change that we need. That said, we have a climate change bill that is in discussion in the South African Parliament. That is the first step that we need to clear. After that, we need to have a united response. Let's look at one example. President Cyril Ramaphosa really marshaled Africa really well through the COVAX initiative to cause Africa to speak with one voice in getting COVID-19 vaccines. We need to have really the same approach to climate change. Africa really contributes very little to emissions in the order of about 4%. And so Africa needs to start going to initiatives like the Conference of the Parties and speak with one voice and insist that the rich nations that have caused all the pollution that is causing the problems to start paying up for mitigation and adaptation policies.
Yeah. We're speaking of a just transition. I mean, how far-reaching is that just transition? Does it go far enough? I mean, if you look at the conversation I had with the minister, he said by, I think, 2030, we would still be pretty much 60% creating electricity via coal in this country.
Yes, and that is why it is really important to shift to low emitting sources. I heard you speaking to the previous speaker really about our energy mix. We need to have a lot more solar and wind. South Africa really is the biggest repository for solar and wind on the African continent, and it is a shame that we are not using a lot more of that. Now, some of the emissions that we have already caused are locked in for a while, but then we still need to work together to cap warming below 1.5 degrees, because every 0.5 increase will lead to what we are seeing, for example, in East Africa now, massive crop failures. It will lead to what we have had in Southern Africa for about 10 years, a multi-year drought which pushed over 2 million people out of farming. It caused some of the problems that we saw, all the poor that were trying to mine for diamonds, and obviously the June-July riots that we had last year. A lot of these things we often do not connect the dots, but we really should be thinking in those terms. And I think that really we should not give up because of the problems that already exist. The problems that already exist should push us to do a lot more.
I appreciate your time. That is the Program Manager at Climate Justice and Socio, Ecological Transformation, Dr. Roland Ngam. When we continue